Hello and welcome to this video from Board Game Aids. Today we're looking at the charming adventure game Mice and Mystics from 2012. In this game, 6 mouse-sized heroes must battle to bring justice to the besieged land of Venestra. Although the game itself is magical and mystical, the rules themselves shouldn't be a mystery. So let's have a look at 10 rules you might have missed with Mice and Mystics. Let's take the initiative of our first rule by looking at how to set up the initiative track. This will happen at the start of the game or whenever a new encounter card is drawn. If there are already minions on the minion track when you need to add new minions, then simply add those minions to the end of the initiative track. If you're adding a boss minion, which will have 2 initiative cards, then remember to ambush the first of those 2 cards. To do this, roll a dice, look at the numerical value, in this case number 2, and move that card up that number of places, shifting down the other cards. If you need to set up the initiative track and there are no minions on the track already, take the cards already on the track, which will be heroes, shuffle in your minions, and then deal out the cards from top to bottom to determine the initiative order. Time is short for our mice heroes, so make sure you're making the most of all of your turns. Remember, the first thing you have to do in your turn, which is mandatory, is roll for movement, even if you don't plan moving on that turn. This is important, for example, in Chapter 1, when the crow will attack if you get a bad roll. Once you roll for movement, you can then either take an action, then move, or move, then take an action. You can also take any number of free actions which are listed here. Remember though that you can't interrupt one action with another action. Although the mice have big hearts, they have very small backpacks. Remember that a mouse hero can only carry 3 items at any one time in their pack. You can also carry any number of tricks in your pack, and remember that party items don't count towards an individual mouse's carrying limit and are considered to belong to the entire group. Also remember that when you equip items, you can only have 1 item per body slot. For example, here you could only equip 1 helmet in this particular slot, as shown on the highlighted mouse icon. Attacking and hopefully defeating enemies is a big part of Mice and Mystics, but remember that a mouse can't attack unless you've got a weapon equipped. Also remember that to make a melee attack, you need a card that has a melee ability. For example, here Nez's hammer has the melee icon in the top right hand corner. Likewise, you can't make a ranged attack unless you have an item which allows you to make a ranged attack. There are some cards that are exceptions to this, but in general you need to make sure you've got the weapon for the type of attack that you're trying to make. Encounter cards are a pain, getting in the way of the mice's best made plans and also making them fight lots of nasty monsters. Just remember that the surge effect on each card can only trigger once. Once the surge effect is triggered, for example in this case 2 rats, remember to discard that card until you need to draw another encounter card, which is usually when you explore a new area. The number of models that can fit on a space in Mice and Mystics is an interesting aspect of the game, and one that creates some interesting strategical decisions. Don't forget there can only ever be 1 large base minion per space, or 4 smaller models, for example the rats here, or the 4 heroes, per an individual space. Also remember that if a space is full, a minion or a hero can't move through that particular space. For example, Tilda here is perfectly safe, as the rat can't move through the 4 heroes that block him. Also remember this affects the placement of minions when you're setting up an encounter card or at the beginning of the game. Just remember to look at the limits for each space. Things are looking really bad for our mouse heroes. They're overwhelmed by monsters, and one of the rats has just made a defence roll of 3 cheese. There are a couple of things to remember here which may help our heroes. The first thing is that any cheese in excess of the 6th space on the wheel is discarded and in effect forgotten about, so in this case we'd only place 1 cheese, which unfortunately will cause a surge. One thing to help here is, if the surge calls for more models than are available, just place as many of those models as you can and ignore the rest. For example, here the surge tells us to place 2 rats, but we only have 1 model remaining, so we're only going to place 1 model on the board following the normal placement rules. This may help our heroes to live to see another day. Time to get up close and personal. Remember that when moving, a minion will move into the same space as a mouse hero if it's able to. This is important, as remember a mouse can only leave a space in its turn if the number of mice in that space is greater or equal to the number of minions. For example here, Lily is unfortunately now trapped in the space until she manages to defeat one of the 2 rats. Searching is an important part of Mice and Mystics, and a great way to power up our heroes so they stand a chance against the evil that faces them. Just remember that if you're making a search, whether scenario specific or standard, you first need to roll a success on 1 die, which means getting the small star-shaped symbol in the bottom right hand side of that die. Also remember that if you draw an item, a weapon, an armour, accessory, skull or trick, that you can immediately choose to discard that card to get 1 cheese. This is a hard decision to make, but done at the right time can be very powerful in helping the mice to overcome specific enemies. One small rule that's often misplayed is to concern water spaces. Just remember that when on a water space, a mouse hero can't use free actions, which means there's no sharing, equipping or levelling up. The appearance of Brody is always a pain, giving our heroes a cat-shaped problem to deal with when they're already usually busy. One thing that will help is to remember that when Brody rolls for attack and defence and rolls cheese, you don't add cheese to the minion wheel. This should make the game slightly easier and avoid our heroes becoming overwhelmed. On the subject of boss minions, remember that when you damage a boss minion, you can choose to put the damage on either card. The best advice here is to get rid of the nastiest card, so that the mice don't have to face that card in future turns. Be careful with the placement rules for minions with ranged. Remember that all small base minions with ranged will go on the same space that is furthest from our mouse heroes. Remember that you do need to follow placement rules, which means there should be no more than 4 small base minions per space, and then you would need to choose another space if that space becomes full. One exception to this is any spaces with a red border, for example tables. Here any number of minions with range can be placed, ignoring the usual placement rules. When a particular minion's card comes up on the initiative track, all minions of that type will move and attack our heroes. But remember the order for this move and attack is starting with the minion that's closest to the mice heroes and then moving outwards. So in this example, this rat here would move and attack first, and the rat right at the back here would move and attack last. This concludes our video for 10 rules you might have missed with the excellent game Mice and Mystics. Please subscribe to the Board Game Age channel for future videos, and thank you for watching this video. Until next time, play carefully.